Well, good morning from Route 66, and what do we have here? This is Springfield, Illinois, and that is the home of one of its most prominent lawyers. My friends, just off Route 66, this is the home of Abraham Lincoln, and I'm bringing my son London to check it out as we near the end of our Route 66 journey. It's not just Lincoln's house that is preserved here in Springfield, Illinois. The National Park Service has actually tried to preserve whatever was left of his old 1860 neighborhood. They're doing a little history walk and talks around today. It's really beautiful down here. I'll tell you what, Abraham Lincoln lived in a pretty swanky neighborhood. We always have this image of him as the poor guy growing up in the backwoods, and then suddenly he became president. We forget about the successful lawyer period in between where he did all the work for the railroads and lived in this swanky part of town. All the houses down here are cool, but obviously the star attraction was the beautiful home of the Lincolns. Dude, it's amazing. And you don't just have to look at the outside. All it takes is a simple visit to the visitor center, and if you're lucky enough to be here on a day that's not super packed like today, you can get a free ticket to head inside the home of Mr. Lincoln. Dude, right away, the tour is amazing. You find yourself immediately standing in the Lincoln's formal parlor / living room where, thankfully, all this horsehair furniture is original. Not just the black horsehair chairs either, but the knick-knack and whatnot shelf. And even Abraham Lincoln's prized bookcase is standing in the corner. The guided tour is actually very well done. These national park rangers are pretty expert at what's in the home, what's original and what's not original. And although the house isn't huge, it's big enough to fit at least 2 tour groups inside at once, which is pretty impressive. And it's a lot bigger than where I live. Obviously, I can't play you the entire tour, but here's a bit of what our guide was like.
They call this the sitting room. Now you would find Mrs. Lincoln over on the right-hand side. Under that big mirror on the wall is the sewing table. Mirror and table are both original as well. Mary would make and mend all of the clothing for her boys by hand. It's a lot of work for one woman, especially because while she's working there, the boys would have wrestling matches on the floor here. That was their favorite activity. And when I say the boys, I mean Abraham as well as the kids. He would wrestle his children on the floor, showing off his skills. If you didn't know, growing up on the frontier, Lincoln actually has a record of winning over 300 wrestling matches. And he is in fact in the Wrestling Hall of Fame today as well. That is true. So he shows that skill off to his boys. But if they didn't want to wrestle, well, they could also play board games. We see the replica chess set over on the table there. On that same table, there's also the tall wooden box. That is called a stereoscope. That is a device to show you pictures in 3D. Using the cards on the table, you slide them in, you look in the eyepieces, the pictures pop out in front of your very eyes. Pretty cool stuff for the time. That cost Lincoln about $25, which is about $900 today. So very nice device. Still the same one right there on the table. And the other source of fun they had here, I have to mention, there were Lincoln pets. They had animals in the house. There was a Lincoln family dog. His name was Fido.
After you see the downstairs, you walk up the staircase, touching the actual banister Abraham Lincoln touched every day, and find yourself upstairs, first in the guest room, which is way nicer than mine, and then in the Lincoln's private bedrooms. Lots of amazing stuff in here, including Mr. Lincoln's chamber pot, but our guide preferred another piece of Lincoln history.
Still, I have to say, that desk is my favorite item in the home because it is Lincoln's original writing desk. If you have heard of that very famous speech of his, "A house divided against itself cannot stand," we think he wrote it on that desk.
Anyway, after their bedroom, we headed to what's called Mary's room, where they kept her stuff, including her original commode.
It is original. She would be thrilled that we show it to hundreds of people every day.
Can't get enough of that commode. It's close quarters, and there's a lot of people as we see heirlooms and the boys' rooms and the servants' rooms, and finally head downstairs to the kitchen. It's hard to film on the tour because there's a lot of people, small space, but it's wonderful to actually be inside that house. I highly recommend it, 10 out of 10. And if you could read a Lincoln book before you come here, it's going to enhance the experience tenfold.
Old Abraham Lincoln loved himself some biscuits and some fish, but he didn't love nothing more than he loved those cakes. Abraham Lincoln loves cake.
Ooh. Abraham Lincoln's outhouse. Oh, look, he could share with friends. All right, that was awesome. I did go in the Lincoln home on my original Route 66 series in 2017, but remember, this isn't the next follow-up series. This is a series about taking London down Route 66. What'd you think?
Big.
Yeah, he just said, I'd live in that home. It's like, yeah, the whole upstairs part, we're like, well, it's nice and humble for the boys and the servants. Like, it's just bigger than our house, you know? So Abraham Lincoln was doing pretty well. And he paid $1,500 for this. 15, that's not even my rent. That's not even half of my rent. Now, surprisingly, Route 66 comes right past old Abraham Lincoln's home and his hometown here of Springfield. So you would think the Lincoln Highway would crisscross Route 66 here, but no. The Lincoln Highway is way up further north. What's great about a morning or now afternoon in Springfield is it's not just Lincoln's house and his neighborhood that are still here. Just a 10-minute walk away is the old courthouse where Abraham Lincoln actually practiced law. He was a state senator. He was Speaker of the House over here. And I believe that's also where Abraham Lincoln gave his famous House Divided speech. It makes sense that as an Illinois lawmaker and lawyer, Abraham Lincoln's law office would be just across the street from that. And I love that in between we've got this statue of Mary Todd Lincoln sprucing up and fixing up her husband, Abraham Lincoln, between his law office and the old state house. It's almost like he was coming downstairs with his mind full of legal matters and not thinking about his appearance, and then he comes out here, now, Mr. Lincoln, you better not be going in the state house looking like that. You're not in a state fit to be seen. Fix your collar, dear. The law office over there is actually a Springfield visitor center now. As you can see, it's only the skinny part of the building that faces the state house. The whole building, much like Lincoln himself, was rather long. London's inside talking to someone. Look at this, the Lincoln Herndon law offices. That is so crazy. This is where Abraham Lincoln did business. We've seen where he did his business. Now, where he conducted the business of the day. All right, heading in. Downstairs in the visitor center, they have some recreated versions of Lincoln's law office, etc. Look at that old piece of furniture there. And in the same building was actually a federal courtroom. So Lincoln not only did his office work here, sometimes he actually did his case work here, which is pretty crazy. The building was so long, it was used for multiple purposes. And look at this. It looks like Mr. Lincoln's still in the building. We actually caught Mr. Lincoln and his personal bodyguard out of character, off the clock. And the great thing was, what were they doing? They were telling Lincoln stories. Now, normally you can go in the old state capitol, you can see the place where Abraham Lincoln was laid out for that final funeral where he gave those speeches, but today there's some kind of construction going on, some remodeling, something's going on over there. So we're going to the ultimate Lincoln destination here in downtown Springfield, the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. To the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. Dude, I love this place. It is a world-class museum. Disney Imagineers even worked on it. It is very immersive. You can either start with the Lincoln's White House years or do what we're doing and start with the early years, born in Kentucky and through Indiana. And this museum used to be like photography and videography was pretty much completely forbidden the last time I was here. And that has changed now, which I was totally unprepared for. We would have dedicated a whole day to it, but you know what? At least we're getting a glimpse. And the main thing is that London's here to learn about it. This is the kind of stuff I always want to take my son to. I want him to learn. I want him to put stuff in his brain. And even if it's really not that interesting to him at the moment, which actually, surprisingly, I think it is, you never know what might sink in and what might be in your kid's future. Wow, this is a replica of Lincoln's boyhood home. The cabin in Indiana. Look at that. The family is asleep. Lincoln's up with the dog, educating himself. He only had 1 year of school, 1 year of education at all. All the rest of his learning was self-taught. They had to make the cabin bigger so that people could fit in it. The other side of the railing, that's the actual size of the cabin 6 people lived in. That's pretty crazy, but you see what I mean about immersive environment. I mean, this is as good as Pirates of the Caribbean in here. It is really, really immersive. Talks about Lincoln's trips down the river, all the different jobs he had as a young man, obviously seeing slave auctions and the impact that would have on him to become so anti-slavery. Talks about his time at the Barry Lincoln store in New Salem and how he went off to fight in the Black Hawk Indian War. You don't just learn a lot about Lincoln's life, you also get a sense of the environments he was in here, including a sense of what it was like to go out a-courting with old Abe. Hey, Mary, did I ever tell you about the one about peeing in the hayloft? Oh, Abe, stop it. Look at that. He's giving her the eye. She's playing it cool, though. She's playing it cool. Oh, man, look at that. We're headed into Lincoln's political career. Look at, you got the Lincoln-Douglas debates where Abraham Lincoln was running against Stephen A. Douglas to try to be a United States senator. Dude, I'm 6 foot tall. Mr. Lincoln was a tall man. Look at the size of that president. It's crazy that the little short fella won the election, but Lincoln would have the last laugh eventually. Oh, and here we learn more about home life and the house that we were just in. And it looks like home life was a little rowdy with all those boys in the house. He even let the boys come into his law office. And they'd be playing and driving his law partners insane. But he liked it. I mean, look how he grew up in the cabin, you know? Lincoln's father was sort of an abusive old tyrant. And so Lincoln was classically the opposite. He was one of those dads that pretty much enforced very little to no discipline at all. So many amazing artifacts throughout this museum and very interesting ways of telling the story of the election of 1860 that made Abraham Lincoln the president. Just like Lincoln, we're on the road to the White House now. Oh, man. Yeah, last time I was here, there was absolutely no video or photography allowed in the museum. It was actually when I was at Ripley's, believe it or not, their corporate offices, where they told me that there's been all kinds of scientific studies done by museums that they get more visitors the more they allow photos and video. So that old mentality of, but if we let people take pictures, they won't come and see in the museum, is thankfully starting to fade. Oh, look at this. And once we get to the White House, Mary Todd Lincoln started spending money like crazy, both to redecorate the people's house and to adorn herself in proper style. She got in so much debt. She was super relieved when Lincoln won that second term because she thought, oh, okay, good, we'll be able to pay that all off now. Of course, Mary's debts weren't the biggest deal in the White House when Lincoln was president. Obviously, they paled in comparison to the struggle of the Civil War. Dude, and by the way, if you think presidents go through a lot now, if you think politics is nasty and dirty today, which it is, you have no idea how nasty and dirty 19th century politics were, both before, during, and after the Civil War. But look at this, just a small example, a small sampling of some of the nasty cartoons and images surrounding Lincoln's presidency. They said some truly horrible things about poor old Honest Abe. People often say, it's worse now than ever. Guys, we had a civil war. Let's be thankful and hopeful that it never happens again. Oh, and of course, Lincoln faced personal tragedy in the White House as well, with the loss of his own son, even as so many other parents were losing their sons on the battlefields of the Civil War. This is a very sad moment in Lincoln's history, but look at how amazingly well done the museum is. Just, it's so immersive, and you feel it in every scene. You feel the anxiety and the whispering up there of all the political machinations, and then you come in here and see what he was dealing with at home. It's really laid out well. The lighting is done well. It's incredible. Then, of course, there's the Emancipation Proclamation, both Lincoln's cabinet's reaction to the proclamation, and then, of course, the public's and the press's. And just like today, people say, Lincoln didn't go far enough, or Lincoln went too far. Well, I guess most people don't say Lincoln went too far nowadays. Because most people don't have an appreciation for what was going on in Lincoln's time, they don't realize the insane political pressure on him, the insane political burden. But look at this amazing museum. It is like walking through history. They really have done a fantastic job presenting it. It's like being in a movie, actually. You feel the drama. You feel the scenes of Lincoln's presidency and the Civil War and the tragedy and the triumph. You feel like you're walking through victory, like everything is just finally going right until it all goes horribly, horribly wrong at Ford's Theater. There's that stinking actor. You can't trust them. This is why entertainers shouldn't be involved in politics. How much more proof do you need? That is why I do not and will never get involved in politics. However, I do love history. Even though some chapters in our history are very, very sad indeed. And look at the long road Abraham Lincoln took to get home here to the State House that we just saw, where he lay in state for the last time, where the people took leave of the people's president. Not only do they do such an incredible job that my eyes are actually getting sweaty with respect in here, but I feel like I'm at a funeral. Like I feel like, you know, oh, it's amazing here, guys. It's amazing. Whew. Okay. Time to get out of here. Whew. Oh man, I was ready to see a few artifacts after that. It gets kind of heavy there in the end of the storyline. And I know this isn't our normal Route 66, old diners and gas stations and old ghost roads episode, but one, it seems like the more time passes, the more the mass population doesn't understand this most important president and his era. Two, it's obviously really important for me to take my son to these places and for him to see this history. And three, I mean, Route 66 comes right through Springfield, Illinois. If you're going to Springfield, Illinois, this is the main attraction. And I must say, this must be one of the greatest museums I've ever been to in terms of really telling a story and having you feel the story. Now it's time for us to continue our story. But don't worry, we're not done with Mr. Lincoln quite yet. Oh, sure, now the sun comes out. Because just up old Route 66, with a slight detour, is something incredible that must be seen. And that is the tomb of Abraham Lincoln. One thing that's awesome about coming out here and seeing Lincoln's home and where his outhouse was and all the artifacts and then the tomb is it really makes him a real person, you know, more than visiting the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. or something like that, or maybe just seeing his hat in the Smithsonian. You really get a sense of a person. Look at this, the Lincoln bust outside. His nose is all shiny because it's an old good luck thing. You're supposed to give his nose a little rub. It's a little strange to see these construction walls, but the good news is that means they're taking care of the place. They're taking care of it. You know, there have been so many profound things said about Abraham Lincoln that as we walked through the tomb, I really couldn't think of anything to add. So instead, I think I'll read you Lincoln's farewell speech to his friends at Springfield. To this place and the kindness of these people, I owe everything. Here I have lived a quarter of a century and have passed from a young to an old man. Here my children have been born, and one is buried. I now leave, not knowing when or whether ever I may return, with a task before me greater than that which rested upon Washington. Without the assistance of that divine being who ever attended him, I cannot succeed. With that assistance, I cannot fail. Trusting in him who can go with me and remain with you, and be everywhere for good, let us confidently hope that all will yet be well. To his care commending you, as I hope in your prayers you will commend me, I bid you an affectionate farewell. It was also pretty strange in there and very surreal because we ran into somebody who watches Randomland who actually works in the Lincoln tomb, and so we were able to step behind the rope. I found out that Lincoln's actually buried about 3 feet behind the monument you see from the public side of the rope. We got a little glimpse of how it works backstage in the tomb, and that there's a staff that actually has to take care of it and man it and keep Lincoln safe and the place clean. And we talked about some pretty interesting things we may be able to do around Springfield in the future. So yes, I've been to Lincoln's grave and tomb and museum before, but it seems to be the theme on this trip that no two visits to a place are ever quite the same. All right, and so we've taken leave of Mr. Lincoln's tomb and traveling up old Route 66, at least part of the way, we've gone from Mr. Lincoln's tomb to... Who else? Mr. Lincoln! Look at that. That's skinny Abraham Lincoln, the rail splitter from his childhood where he split logs into rails for fences, and you know what I'm gonna say. Would you look at the size of that Lincoln? This guy was built in 1967 for this place, the Illinois State Fairgrounds. And he's always been one of my favorite homemade Lincolns on the route. And speaking of Route 66, they've added a new attraction to the fairgrounds. No, not the famous giant Route 66 slide. It's the Route 66 Experience, or I should say the Illinois Route 66 Experience. This is a new permanent exhibit, a new permanent public park within the Illinois State Fairgrounds where you can walk all 400 plus miles of Illinois Route 66 with replicas of the neon signs that used to light the way. There are all kinds of vehicles that are very playground-like, all kinds of signs, and all these little huts that have different sections of the route and information about it. There's even a little replica chain of rocks bridge. You can really get to know the land of Lincoln on Route 66 without ever leaving Springfield. Look at this, it pays tribute to all the giant fiberglass statues and muffler men along Illinois Route 66, and there are a lot of them. It is absolutely incredible. There's lots of information here. Look at this old Burma Shave sign throwback. They even have a little drive-in theater. Look at the classic clips of old movies and little cars that kids could sit inside and pretend in. I mean, it's incredible. And if you think it looks good in the daytime, it looked even more awesome last night when we first got into Springfield. I mean, the neon is lit all day, but obviously it's better looking at night. It's pretty incredible. It really deserves its own whole long tour, but of course today we are still in Springfield and it is almost 5 p.m. and I got a little spoiler alert for you guys for this Route 66 adventure. As far as London and I and this adventure on Route 66 are concerned, we are nearly finished. Not because there's not so much more stuff between here and Chicago, but because we actually only ever intended to get to Springfield and we were gonna get here a lot faster. We ended up spending 3 or 4 or 5 more days on Route 66 getting all into the weeds and covering little detailed things on the way here. And now both of us, for serious but different reasons, have got to start thinking about getting home. And so we've got to make it all the way up just outside of Chicago tonight. Actually, let's hop in the car right now as I'm telling you all this stuff, which is heartbreaking because there's tons of stuff that's already closed now and museums that are already closed and things that we'd like to see. We wanted to see Bob Waldmeier's stuff in the museum in Pontiac and all the other classic stuff along Illinois Route 66, some of which, actually a lot of which, I've covered in the Route 66 playlists on this channel. You can go back and find those old episodes of Randomland, classic episodes on Route 66, and other places I'm just gonna have to return to on my next visit, which, don't worry, will not be 7 years apart like this trip and the last one. I owe a lot more time to Illinois' section of Route 66. I know that. It's obviously the farthest section from my home in California. I'm just gonna have to figure out a way to tuck some money aside, maybe fly out here, maybe rent a car from Chicago and just deal with Illinois, you know, get deep into some history, get deep into some information. But even though most of the stuff is closed now, we're cruising up sort of after hours on Route 66 because most places roll up the sidewalk up before the end of the business day. It's still amazing seeing the countryside roll by, seeing some of these incredible sights along the way. Route 66 in Illinois, there are multiple paths and there are multiple journeys, and each one makes for an incredible adventure. All right, gang, well, we've made it to Atlanta, Illinois. Not far from Springfield, honestly, and I feel like this happened on the last trip, too. I remember being right here on old Route 66 with you, talking about how that used to be the old bus stop and that this street was the busy place where everyone would get off the bus and everything. But same situation, the local Atlanta museum was closed. It was after hours just like this. I had come all the way from California, so I was starting to burn out and lose my mind a little bit like this. Today, mostly I have this horrible splitting headache. I think London has a minor one, I got a big one. It's we're not dehydrated, just a headache. And I remember being out here at pretty much exactly the same time of day when we last laid eyes on this. The hot dog muffler man who used to be in Cicero up by Chicago. And even I'm running out of energy for this with the headache, but you know what I'm gonna say. All right, hold it together. Would you look at the size of that wiener? It's gargantuan, nearly the biggest wiener I've ever seen on my head. I'll turn that truck down. London, turn the truck down. Dude, this was the star of the show last time I was in Atlanta, but no longer. Because even though plenty of people are still pulling over to visit the giant wiener man, he's no longer the biggest game in town. Because behold, just catty corner from the old wiener holding muffler man is the thing that I am the most bummed out we are just missing on Route 66, but the most stoked that we are seeing up here in Illinois. It's the new American Giants Museum. Now, if you don't know what American Giants is, it for the most part refers to those guys, the Muffler Man. I've shown you the original first Muffler Man ever. He was built as a lumberjack. He's in Flagstaff, Arizona. So they have been a Route 66 staple For all these years, they've been known as muffler men now for years and years and years, but it can also apply to sort of anything giant and fiberglass. These old, well, American giants from the road, and the name specifically comes from one guy, the world's foremost expert on the American giants, a fella by the name of Joel Baker, who we've sort of been internet allies for a long time. I love to shout out anything they do. I'm a gargantuan fan of their work because Joel and his team have been involved with finding, locating, documenting, restoring, repairing, rebuilding, and rehoming the largest assemblance of giants you could ever imagine. Tons of these guys. Now look at what you have right here. You got the Snurd giant. It's the old Alfred E. Newman head style giant. This is apparently the first giant purchased and restored by Joel and the American Giants crew. And the thing is, every giant they've dealt with, whether it's, you know, their Instagram account, just posting a picture of one of these muffler men on the side of the road, or this one here that they've taken and restored and replanted in Atlanta at the land of giants. For every single one of these guys, they can tell you who made it, International Fiberglass in this case, what years, what towns it was located in, when it was moved to some old farm, who repaired it. I don't want to say I've been the world's biggest fan of their work, because, I mean, look at the size of this guy right here, but they've worked with everyone. Buck Adam, lots of Uniroyal gals and lumberjacks and things all up and down Route 66 and all across America. Like, look at this guy on the opposite side of the museum over here. This is a Texaco big friend, and you know what? Maybe it's the headache, but I'm having a really hard time. I'm struggling, trying to remember the last time I've seen one of these in the wild, and I have never seen one in this condition. Look at it. It looks fantastic. Imagine these giant guys beckoning you in their clean, beautiful uniforms into a Texaco station. This one used to live outside Pahrump, Nevada. And I'll spare you the long version of the story for now, but let's just say this guy wasn't in very good shape in 2015 and 16. He'd been gutted for the metal inside, left out in the desert, kind of laying down, not good. And not only has he clearly been rescued by Joel and his team and restored, look at that beautiful restoration right there, but he's now joined the Cicero hot dog guy of Atlanta, that's a little confusing, as a Route 66 attraction, and American Giants has opened up a museum here now. And even though we've never met in person, I'm like so proud of those guys. I'm so happy that they've done this. I've always been such a giant fan of their work, no pun intended. I'm only gonna give you the briefest of peeks inside. This just opened in 2024. Actually, it's barely been open for more than a month. And as you can see, they're really just getting started. Look at all these concrete pads out here in this little Route 66 rest area they've created with a little drinking fountain. It's going to be the land of the giants for sure. I cannot wait to see what they do with this. I cannot wait to see how it grows. I cannot wait to see the inside of that museum other than peeking through the windows. I actually just messaged Joel the other night because I figured they would be down in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Those guys are helping set up Stella Adam, Buck Adams' girlfriend. We missed that ceremony. Now we come up here. Joel's not here. None of the guys are here. This has been 10 years of ships in the night activities, but I'm a massive fan of the Mother Road. Clearly, they're a massive fan of the Mother Road, locating their museum right here in Atlanta, Illinois, right along old Route 66, right where they can keep an eye on another muffler man. I'm super annoyed that our buddy old Abraham Lincoln kept us busy and we just missed the closing of the museum today. But you know what? In another way, it's good, because you can tell they're going to be adding stuff to this like crazy. And to be honest with you, I'm such a big fan of Joel and his crew and all of the American Giants lovers out there that probably it's for the best that we save this museum and our conversations with whoever's inside for a time where we could spend a little more time than the 15 minutes we have now to blast through town. Like I mentioned, I have an absolutely Abraham Lincoln, the rail-splitting headache. And even though we've really run out of time to explore any of these places, mostly because almost everything's gonna be closed along the route from here on out, and we've got exactly, let me check, none more days to spend on the Illinois portion of Route 66. We're still having a blast. We are still driving down old Route 66, and we've still been taking in lots of the sights and sounds and scenes of the fading sunlight and the old Mother Road through Illinois. And as it gets more and more dense towards Chicago, it's still been fun to check out. And it's making me already think backwards at all the memories that we've made on this trip up and down old Route 66, and it's making me think of all the things that I missed and all the things that I want to come back and see and all the future trips that I want to do. But you know what? I'm going to save those final thoughts for the end of the road, and that will be the next time we catch up with you. But don't forget, we still have to drive all the way home, and there's still way many more adventures to have this summer. I've just been glad to spend this time with you, London, on Route 66 with my son here before he heads into his senior year. And I really have to thank you guys for watching this adventure with us, for coming on this adventure with us, really, because London's been helping me, and every day we've been working our butts off and sweating out here trying to share some of this experience with all of you guys. So do me a favor, if you enjoy these videos, please do the thing that helps the most. I share it with 2 friends who've never seen it. 2 friends that might enjoy a little bit of Randomland action, whether it's the Disneyland stuff, the Route 66 stuff, the history stuff. And if you really want to help the show survive and you want to help keep us on the road, you can go join Patreon. You can check out our merch. I've got sick hats. I've got copies of my new book that I wrote, Tales from Randomland. Yes, I wrote a book. There aren't even any pictures in it. Figure that out. Hopefully, if everything went according to plan, what you're seeing on your screen right now is a montage of more places we got to take pictures of and fly past on old Route 66 and more driving. And we have a lot more driving ahead of us as I sit here right now, because tonight, my friends, tonight, we sleep in Chicago. But for now, this episode has got to end. Stay tuned though, because we still have one last stop on this Route 66 adventure. But for now, you've watched this all the way to the very end, and that means we've all done our duty. We can go home and sleep well. Main Street, USA. Whew, we finally made it. Where's Mickey Mouse?
Oh, better slow down. He's gonna get you. He's gonna get you.
Look at this old ghost road.
Old Ghost Copper.
It's been intense. I cannot overstate the amount of headache today. But both of us know the trip is winding down, so we have been trooping, not state trooping, just regular trooping along down old Route 66. It's been phenomenal. Started out all gray and muggy and horrible. It is ending absolutely gorgeous. London's getting a drone shot of the police station that looks like a gun. And we still gotta make it all the way home. We still have more adventures to go. We're just off the cuff on the random. Pulled over for this, and I just wanted to add to everything. Thank you guys for watching all of these adventures, not just the Route 66 series, or, you know, but I mean all of it, all of Randomland. 11 years, whew, going into 12 years soon. 12 years, oh my gosh. No end in sight. There's still a lot more America to see, a lot more of everywhere to see. And I just appreciate you guys being along for the ride. Whew. More adventures this summer, I hope. We'll see, that's all gonna depend. Help me out, get some merch, check out Patreon, all the things like I normally say in the end of the video, but you already heard. It's been cool. And finally, the weather's not hot or humid now. Like the humidity finally moved on way over there. A train! It's going way slower than I thought. I'm sitting here waiting for the train like, it's coming. Nope. America, God shed his grace on thee, bum 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 bum, and crown thy good with father and sonhood and brotherhood, from sea to shining Chicago, coming up tomorrow. That was creepy, coming out of nowhere. Go home. Sleep well. The mother-in-law left her car here. at all that information about the Civil War. He remembers. He remembers. Busted. He poured out his cup on the grass. Busted. Spragues is gonna sue you.
Would you look at the size of that, Lincoln?
Oh my gosh, he did it. He said, would you look at the side? Look at it.